Minutes. Mr. Giovanni, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. D, I'd like to start with you. I'm curious, you know, a lot of Canadians are concerned right now about some of the legislation that the federal government has introduced, often described as censorious, that it is seeking to organize and centralize more power with the federal bureaucracy to determine what Canadians can see and hear online, and consequently what they can say online. Thinking of legislation like Bill C-11, Bill C-18, for example, I'm curious if you empathize with Canadians who see that and have concerns over that centralization of power here in Ottawa that can affect how Canadians will express themselves across the country.
I think that human beings in general are always suspicious of government power. That's kind of a trait that we all share and are inclined to worry about any interventions that might curb their individual freedoms. I'm not an expert on the communications law that you referred to. Ms. Laidlaw would be a more appropriate expert on that. It's important to note that while people often feel threatened by government interventions, wise government interventions aim to actually protect people and to protect their freedoms. And I'm not an expert on whether these laws do that or not, but I can certainly sympathize with people's worries, right?
Well, you did mention in your opening statement some concerns over what you described as authoritarian decisions by governments. And I do think a lot of Canadians view what the current Liberal government is doing with this legislation as an authoritarian streak, an attempt to control what Canadians can see and hear online and consequently what they can say. So my question to you would be, is it legitimate, in your view, for Canadians to have concerns over governments trying to exercise power and control over their expression? Well,
it really depends on the details of the power and control. So I'll take, for example, the federal government's current fight with Facebook and X. Every day I hear Canadians complaining about their inability to access news through social media. On the other hand, the reason for that legislation is to try to get profits into the hands of independent Canadian journalism outlets so that they can continue to do the job of journalism rather than having those profits entirely reaped by non-Canadian multi-billionaires, right?
So if a student on your campus said, well, I really wish I could see news on Instagram, but I can't because of decisions Justin Trudeau has made, you would say, trust the government?
I would say go to the library because we have every Canadian news outlet in the library online and in hard copy. Go directly to the news sources and seek your information from Canadian journalism, not from American social media.
I see. So you would say that the attempts to organize activists, people who are concerned about issues in their country, who do rely on social media as a way to get information and also as a way to communicate their concerns, that they should just go to the library and accept what Justin Trudeau has done?
That's clearly not what I said. Social media turns out to be very useful for organizing protests and so forth, and it continues to be useful for that. You can't share a newspaper article, but mostly protests aren't organized around the sharing of newspaper articles. You create events, you create discussion boards and so forth. The limitations are actually pretty...
Is there an extent to which the trust in government that you seem to be articulating, that they somehow, this government here in Ottawa, accumulating power and control, has these very nice motives? Is there an extent to which it would be fair to acknowledge that Canadians are right to be skeptical of that, and that when they do open up Instagram and cannot access the news, they should be concerned that there are bureaucrats in Ottawa that really want to determine what they're able to see and not see?
I think Canadians are right to be skeptical of political activities in general, because that skeptical attitude and the desire to seek good information in order to deliberate and make good decisions makes us better citizens. So no matter who's in government, we ought to approach the actions of government with caution.
And would you say then that attempts by a government to control and censor what people can say do deserve critical thinking and response, do deserve serious questions, and that it is right, as a person who said in your opening statement you're concerned about authoritarian exercises of power, that maybe Canadians do have a point when they say that this is a censorious streak that deserves serious attention.
All legislation deserves critical thinking and attention by citizens. I don't agree that trying to support the profits of independent Canadian journalistic outlets
censorship
is
as long as it's raising funds for a purpose.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Giovanni. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much, Chair, and appreciate the testimony offered here today. And certainly, I find it fascinating that the Liberals would try to make an issue of the fact that for now, 5 weeks, they refuse to release documents that is delaying government business from taking place in the House of Commons. Wouldn't it be simple if they would just offer the basic level of accountability? Ms. Laidlaw, my question that I hope you can shed some light on is when it comes to the where government is and the power that government wields, especially in terms of regulation. You mentioned, I believe, in your opening statement about shadowy, and I forget exactly, but shadows in regards to algorithm and the lack of transparency that exists in that. And certainly, I know that I hear often just a lack of trust in from Canadians when it comes to algorithms, when it comes to government's involvement in that. Do you share concern that it seems through, whether it's Bill C-11, Bill C-18, that there seems to be a consolidation of the ability for government to get involved in what Canadians see online? Do you share concerns? And if so, could you outline a little bit what those concerns are in regards to C-11 and C-18 and anything else that the government is proposing that would send a chill about Canadians' guaranteed right to freedom of expression and freedom of speech?
Yes, thank you for the question. Because I think that the answer is somewhat complicated, which is that one of the reasons that we have the charter right to freedom of expression is to protect us also from government overreach. Right. I think that the complicating factor is that how we enjoy freedom of expression, the right to seek, receive, and impart information, is happening more and more through different sources and through private parties. And we've always had laws in those spaces, both to protect freedom of expression and protect us from harm. And in the area of technology law, Canada is woefully behind other jurisdictions on all fronts. So, in my opinion, we do need laws because the issue of technology accountability, algorithmic regulation, protection of users, we do require laws, but it matters the type of law. So, for there to be some nervousness about what government is doing and how they do it, that absolutely we should be nervous about that. I was not supportive about Bill C-11 and the social media rules, but I am when it comes to Bill C-63. So I think it just depends on the law.
If I could, just because time is short, one of the things about Bill C-63 that I find really concerning is we have in Canada right now a very objective measure of what hate speech is. And I've heard from constituents that look at what the government has proposed and say that it now becomes very objective, that offence becomes one of the new metrics to which whether something is or is not hate speech can be measured. And certainly when it comes to the subjective nature of what somebody feels is offensive, and I'll use an example for myself. I support the Canadian oil and gas sector. There are Liberals that have called that opinion something that is offensive and filled with hate. And while I struggle to grasp that, and we may share differences of opinions on that matter, the subjective nature to which the Liberals are proposing amendments to hate speech legislation. Do you find that concerning, and how it could be weaponized against specific groups in this country if there's no longer that objective measure and it becomes subjective based on somebody's opinions or, quite frankly, their feelings?
Yeah, and I think that it's always been hard when it comes to hate speech, because the tendency is for people to look at other values and say, oh, well, I approve of freedom of expression when it comes to what I think. I will say this. I think that there are some significant problems with parts 2 and 3 in Bill C-63 that do need to be addressed. The definition of hate, though, does draw from Supreme Court jurisprudence, and I'd encourage everyone to go read the paragraphs, because the paragraphs are actually more fulsome and do set out quite a high threshold. Could there still be problems in interpretation and application? Absolutely, because it's so contextual. But it is drawing from case law, so it is drawing from a legal framework.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move.
Questions will be for Mrs. D. I'm going to start with saying, first of all, it looks like our Conservative colleagues now have a problem with libraries. You were talking about how important it is to get independent news from Canadian sources, and you can go to a library to do that. And before you were cut off, can you finish your thought that you had on Canadians being able to get news that is more Canadian-centric from a library, to use their own brain and their own, I think, analytical skills to know what's what, please?
It isn't about Canadian-centric news. It's about news researched by journalists who are trained to seek truth, right? Citizen journalism, even when well-intentioned, can be a source of misinformation. When it is ill-intentioned, it can be a source of disinformation. We need trained journalists in the journalism sector, both in Canada and internationally, in order to get the truths to citizens, right? And journalism doesn't happen for free. The sector needs to be able to profit enough that it can hire those trained journalists and run their operations. Over the years, the sharing of journalistic content by third-party providers without any compensation to the journalism sources themselves has crippled the journalism sector and made it very, very difficult for that truth-seeking to occur. There needs to be some kind of compensation for the experts who are actually out there sourcing the news and helping us to be well-informed citizens.
Thank you so much for clarifying that about trained journalists. And these are huge topics with all the changes that are happening on social media. WhatsApp is now being used as a news source, and a lot of our news is being affected by foreign interference. This is just a whole nother ball game. Can you please quickly, because I have another question, do a survol? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have a colleague in at my university, Dr. Brian McQuinn, who specifically researches the use of social media for political polarization that leads to violence and conflict, and it is very real. Social media is increasingly becoming a mechanism for violence and conflict.
Thank you so much. And we have our Conservative colleagues talking about so-called government censorship and blaming everything on Justin Trudeau. This is a huge part of the problem for him being now attacked the way he is. Quickly, this so-called censorship that they're talking about, I have a quote for you, and maybe you can tell me what kind of freedom of expression this is. It's very vulgar, so but I'm sure you'll understand. Is this freedom of expression? You could start by effing off to whatever shithole your parents came from, back to the streets your mom and dad sucked D on to make money to come to this great country and give birth to a POS bad woman part like you. These are messages myself and my colleagues are getting. What do you think of this freedom of expression?
I would defer to Ms. Laidlaw. Intuitively, to me, that sounds like borders on hate speech, but I'm not a legal expert, and so that's only my opinion.
And do you think such words, such attacks are permissible? Do you not think the whole purpose of our online harms legislation is to protect people who are vulnerable?
Is lawful, then it is legally permissible. That doesn't make it morally permissible. That's a separate matter. What you've just described is immoral. Whether it's illegal or not is a question for lawyers.
Thank you so much. I think my time is up.